During a gala night, a pregnant woman is humiliated and knocked to the floor before an elite who pretends not to see the cruelty. But when videos expose the truth and unlikely alliances emerge, her voice, once silenced, becomes impossible to ignore. And the fall that almost destroyed her transforms into the beginning of justice no one believed would come. If you like stories like this, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave your comment saying where you're listening from. The Savoy Hotel gleamed that charity gala night in aid of the London Arts Foundation. The luxury of the main ballroom, with its crystal chandeliers and gold-toned decor, contrasted with the starry sky visible through the large windows overlooking the city's most iconic view. Among the guests, London's high society mingled with politicians, business moguls, and international artists, all gathered under the pretext of charity, but evidently more interested in the social connections forming there. Eleanor Albright, 6 months pregnant, adjusted the emerald dress that had been specially designed to flatter her maternal silhouette, without compromising the elegance expected for the event. At 35, with a consolidated career as a contemporary art curator, she represented one of the few female names with true recognition in the national art circuit. Her hand instinctively rested on her belly when she felt the baby move, a small gesture of connection that made her smile amidst that artificial environment. Her gaze swept the ballroom in search of Robert, her partner of 5 years and the current regional Minister of Culture. It wasn't hard to find him. As always, he was surrounded by influential people, distributing calculated smiles and rehearsed gestures that Eleanor knew all too well. Since taking on the political role, Robert seemed increasingly distant, not just physically but in essence. The man who had once captivated her with deep conversations about Turner and Elgar now spoke only of political alliances and high-visibility projects. They say pregnancy makes us more sensitive, but perhaps just more perceptive, Eleanor thought, watching how Robert avoided looking in her direction, even though he knew perfectly well where she was. A glass of sparkling water for the mum-to-be. The familiar voice made Eleanor turn. A waiter offered a glass on a silver tray. She accepted with a silent thank you, trying to conceal the discomfort she felt, not from the weight of the pregnancy, as her body had adapted surprisingly well to the changes, but from the growing sense of not belonging that she had been feeling in recent months. Eleanor Albright, always so maternal. The words, uttered with an artificial sweetness that barely disguised the venom behind them, made Eleanor straighten her spine. Victoria Miller approached, dazzling in her red dress that seemed to have been sewn directly onto her slender body. A former model and current presenter of a cultural program on state TV, a position she had secured shortly after Robert took over the ministry, Eleanor couldn't help but notice. "Victoria, what a surprise to find you here." Eleanor maintained a polite tone, though her fingers lightly squeezed the glass. "Surprise? Darling, I helped organize this event. Or didn't Robert tell you?" Victoria smiled, her dark eyes gleaming with satisfaction as she noticed the shadow that crossed Eleanor's face. "By the way, you two seem so distant lately. The weight of pregnancy, perhaps?" Eleanor took a deep breath. She had known Victoria since their art college days at King's College London, when both competed for the same scholarships and opportunities. A friendship that had turned into rivalry and, later, into something much more complex and bitter, something Eleanor preferred to bury in the past. "I'm perfectly fine. Thank you for your concern." Eleanor smiled diplomatically. "I see you've been quite successful with your TV program. Congratulations." "Thank you. I have good support at the ministry." Victoria leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Robert has been so generous with me." The insinuation hung in the air between them, like toxic perfume. Eleanor knew she should walk away, seek other company, perhaps intercept Robert and remind him of her presence. But something kept her there, perhaps the need to understand the game unfolding without her knowledge. "He has always valued culture," Eleanor replied, deliberately ignoring the subtext. Victoria laughed, a crystalline, false sound. "Ah, Eleanor, always so diplomatic. It was like that too when we shared that small apartment in Islington. Remember? You never confronted unpleasant things, preferring to pretend they didn't exist, like you did when you found out about Thomas and me. The name dropped between them like a silent bomb. Thomas had been Eleanor's first great love back in university. The relationship had ended abruptly when he disappeared without explanation. Only years later did Eleanor discover that Victoria had been involved in the breakup, though she never knew exactly how. That was many years ago, Victoria. Eleanor kept her voice firm. We were practically teenagers. Yes, but some wounds never fully heal, do they? Victoria looked directly at Eleanor's belly. Some losses are irreparable. Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in that gaze that went beyond habitual provocation, something calculated and dangerously premeditated. Before she could respond, Robert finally approached, placing an arm superficially around her shoulders. I see the two most talented women in London are talking. That's great. His enthusiasm sounded forced, and he didn't look directly at Eleanor. Victoria, have you shown Eleanor the details of the exhibition we're planning for next month? We haven't had time to get into professional details yet, Robert, Victoria replied, her hand resting familiarly on his arm. Eleanor observed the gesture and Robert's lack of reaction to it. Something was very wrong, and it wasn't just pregnant woman's paranoia, as he had been implying in recent weeks whenever she questioned his distance and increasingly strange hours. What exhibition would that be? Eleanor asked, maintaining a casual tone despite the knot forming in her throat. Oh, it's a special project, Victoria replied before Robert could open his mouth. We've been working on it for weeks. It's surprising Robert hasn't mentioned it, considering your expertise on the subject. Robert's phone rang, and with visible relief, he stepped away to answer, leaving the two women alone again. Eleanor watched as he walked away without a second glance, without checking if she was okay, without the slightest consideration for the evident discomfort of the situation. He's been busy. Eleanor found herself justifying hating herself for it at the same instant. I'm sure he has. Victoria smiled. That smile. That didn't reach her eyes. Want to know what's truly ironic, Eleanor? You were always the talented one, the brilliant one, the promising one, and now you're here, pregnant and alone, while your partner can barely disguise his disinterest. You know nothing about my relationship. I know more than you imagine. Victoria leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. For example, I know Robert has been spending many nights at the apartment he secretly keeps in Knightsbridge. I know he plans to leave you as soon as the baby is born, to avoid the scandal of abandoning a pregnant woman. I also know he's reorganizing the ministry's funds to ensure you're left without support for your projects. The shock made Eleanor step back. How could Victoria know about the apartment in Knightsbridge? Eleanor had accidentally discovered its existence only 2 weeks earlier, upon finding a bank statement Robert had tried to hide. You're lying. Am I? Ask him about the New Horizons project then. Ask where the money came from to fund it. Ask why my name appears as the lead curator of an exhibition that by rights should be yours. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. New Horizons was the name of the project she had developed for years, an innovative proposal to bring contemporary art to underserved communities in London. Robert knew every detail, every spreadsheet, every necessary connection. At that moment, the orchestra began to play louder, announcing the formal dinner. Guests moved towards the numbered tables. Eleanor saw Robert walk directly to the main table, where the First Minister was already seated. Victoria smiled, satisfied with the impact of her words. Shall we go, Eleanor? I think we're at the same table. Or would you prefer to stay here, contemplating the ruins of your relationship? Something in the way Victoria uttered those words triggered an alarm in Eleanor. There was something more there, something beyond rivalry, beyond professional envy or past disputes. There was a calculated, patient hatred that had waited for the right moment to manifest itself. With suddenly heavy legs, Eleanor followed towards the main table. Victoria walked slightly ahead of her, greeting people, laughing, showing off as if she were the host of the event. Upon reaching the table, Eleanor noticed that Robert had reserved the seat next to him for an influential lord, leaving her a chair between an unknown businessman and Victoria. What a pleasant coincidence. Victoria commented as she sat down, her leg deliberately brushing Eleanor's. "We'll have so much time to talk during dinner." Eleanor tried to catch Robert's eye, but he was completely absorbed in his conversation with the Lord. Dinner was served, elaborate dishes of contemporary cuisine that Eleanor barely managed to touch. Every minute felt like an hour, every venomous comment from Victoria a small jab at her dignity. When dessert was served, an elaborate chocolate trifle with red berry sauce, Eleanor decided she needed a few minutes away from that toxic environment. She rose discreetly, explaining she was going to the restroom. "Want company?" Victoria offered, her smile now almost predatory. "No, thank you. I'll be back in a minute." Eleanor walked away, feeling the gazes that followed her. In the elegant restroom of the Savoy Hotel, she faced her reflection in the mirror. She was pale, and her eyes revealed a tiredness that went beyond the physical. She splashed water on her face, careful not to ruin her makeup, and tried to reorganize her thoughts. If what Victoria had said was true, and something deep down told her it was, then her life was about to completely fall apart. Not just her relationship, but her career, her projects, everything she had fought for years. And amidst all this, there was a baby on the way, an innocent life that would depend on her. When she returned to the ballroom, the atmosphere seemed even more suffocating. The orchestra was now playing a waltz, and some couples danced in the center of the hall. Eleanor saw Robert animatedly talking to the First Minister and his wife. Victoria was not at the table. It was as she approached her seat that Eleanor saw her, suddenly emerging from behind an ornate column. There was something different in her gaze now, a cold, almost clinical determination. "You know what's truly pathetic, Eleanor. You never suspected. All these years, and you never realized I was always there, waiting, watching, planning. What are you talking about? Thomas wasn't the only man I took from you. There were others. Small sabotages, lost opportunities, doors that mysteriously closed. And now, Robert," Victoria stepped forward, her voice low but perfectly audible to Eleanor. "But this time it's different. This time I don't just want the man, or the opportunity. I want to see you fall. Literally." The movement was so swift and disguised that no one around noticed. With an apparently casual gesture, Victoria pushed a chair backward, directly into Eleanor's path. Unbalanced by the sudden movement and the altered position of her center of gravity due to pregnancy, Eleanor could not avoid the fall. Time seemed to slow as she fell. Her arms instinctively wrapped around her belly, trying to protect the baby. Her back hit the polished marble floor, and the glass she held shattered beside her, scattering water and crystal shards. The sound of the impact and the breaking glass created a momentary silence in the ballroom. Conversations ceased, the music stopped, and all eyes turned to the pregnant woman fallen on the floor. Eleanor felt a sharp pain in her back and a terrible fear for the baby. But more painful than the physical fall was the expression she caught on Robert's face. Not concern, not alarm, but irritation. As if her accident was a social inconvenience, a stain on the perfect event he had helped organize. Victoria knelt beside her, an expression of false concern on her face. "My God! Eleanor, are you okay? You tripped over the chair." And it was then, as strange hands tried to help her up and worried voices murmured around, that Eleanor heard Victoria's whisper in her ear, so low that no one else could hear. "This is just the beginning. For that night, 15 years ago, when you rejected what we could have been together, when you chose Thomas over me, no one rejects Victoria Miller and gets away with it." The shock of the revelation was even more intense than the physical pain. Long-suppressed memories resurfaced, a night of confessions after, many glasses of wine, an unexpected declaration, an unrequited kiss, a destroyed friendship that Eleanor had attributed solely to professional rivalry. The buzz in the ballroom quickly intensified. Eleanor felt exposed, vulnerable under curious gazes and thinly disguised whispers. Some people approached with genuine concern, while others kept their distance, as if witnessing an unpleasant spectacle that marred the event's sophistication. "Someone call an ambulance!" a female voice shouted from across the ballroom. "There's no need for exaggeration." Robert's voice sounded controlled, almost cold, as he finally approached. "Eleanor has always been a bit theatrical. Those words, spoken loud enough for several guests to hear, pierced Eleanor like needles. The humiliation of the fall now mingled with indignation at the public insinuation that she was dramatizing the situation. "I'm a doctor. Please, give her space." A man of approximately 40, wearing an elegant navy blue suit, made his way through the curious onlookers. He knelt beside Eleanor, his brown eyes conveying a professional calm that contrasted with the surrounding confusion. "Madam, my name is Dr. Rafael Campos. I'm an obstetrician at St. Luke's Hospital. Can you tell me where you feel pain?" The doctor's voice had a subtle Irish lilt that Eleanor couldn't immediately identify. There was a gentleness in him that she hadn't encountered in a long time. "My back, and I'm worried about the baby," Eleanor replied, trying to ignore Victoria's presence, who still remained close, feigning concern. Dr. Raphael instructed her to remain lying down while he checked her vital signs. With precise yet delicate gestures, he examined her reflexes and asked questions about the intensity of the pain and the baby's movements. "We need to take her to the hospital for a full examination," he concluded, then looked directly at Robert, who kept a calculated distance. "Are you the father?" "Yes," Robert replied dryly, checking his watch almost imperceptibly. "We need immediate transport. The fall could have serious consequences for both mother and baby." It was only then that Eleanor saw something change in Robert's face, not exactly concern for her well-being, but perhaps fear of the public consequences of any complication. He quickly took control of the situation, using his phone to call his private driver. "My car is here. We can take her right now," he said, suddenly attentive, though his eyes revealed calculation, not affection. Dr. Raphael carefully arranged Eleanor's transport to the car, improvising a stretcher with the help of 2 waiters who offered their jackets to support her back. Victoria observed everything with a contained smile, like someone discreetly enjoying the unfolding of a successful plan. When Eleanor was already being placed in the back seat of the luxury SUV, Victoria approached Robert and whispered something in his ear. He nodded slightly, an almost imperceptible gesture, but one that Eleanor caught even amidst the pain and confusion. "I'll accompany you to the hospital," Dr. Raphael announced, to Robert's evident displeasure. "There's no need. We have private doctors." Robert tried to dissuade him. "I insist. In fact, it's my professional obligation." The doctor was firm, getting into the vehicle without waiting for permission. During the journey to St. Luke's Hospital in Islington, Eleanor oscillated between physical pain and emotional anguish. Fragments of the conversation with Victoria returned to her mind, along with long-suppressed memories. The final revelation, the true reason behind Victoria's hatred, seemed too surreal to process at that moment. Robert remained silent, alternating his gaze between the window and his phone, as if the personal drama unfolding beside him was an inconvenience in his schedule. Every now and then, he cast impatient glances at Dr. Raphael, who constantly monitored Eleanor's vital signs. "We're arriving. I've already alerted the obstetrics team. We'll have an immediate ultrasound to check the baby," the doctor informed, his voice conveying a reassurance that Eleanor desperately needed at that moment. At the hospital, Eleanor was quickly placed in a wheelchair and taken to an examination room, leaving Robert in the waiting area, visibly annoyed by the situation. Dr. Raphael personally coordinated the procedures, ensuring she received priority attention. While awaiting the ultrasound results, lying on the gurney, Eleanor finally allowed herself to process everything that had happened. Victoria's words echoed in her mind. This is just the beginning, for that night, 15 years ago. Like an old film being rewound, Eleanor went back to that particular night. She and Victoria shared a small apartment in Islington during their 3rd year of university. Thomas, her boyfriend at the time, had travelled to Manchester for an art symposium. After a successful exhibition of young artists at the British Cultural Centre, where Eleanor had received special praise, they celebrated with several bottles of wine. The night had progressed with laughter and confessions. Eleanor had spoken about her future plans with Thomas, about her professional dreams, about the possibility of studying in Europe. And then, unexpectedly, Victoria had held her hand in a different way, her eyes steeped in wine and something deeper, fixed on Eleanor's. "What if I told you there's another path, another love possible?" Before Eleanor could fully process the meaning of those words, Victoria had leaned in and kissed her, a brief kiss, gently interrupted by Eleanor, who had pushed her friend away with kind words about their friendship and her commitment to Thomas. The next day, both pretended nothing had happened. 2 weeks later, Thomas had abruptly ended the relationship without explanation, and in the following months, the friendship between the two women had gradually collapsed, replaced by a bitter rivalry that Eleanor had always attributed to professional competition. She had never imagined that, behind that growing animosity, lay a wounded heart transformed into vengeful obsession over the years. "Mrs. Albright?" The ultrasound technician's voice brought Eleanor back to the present. "Dr. Raphael will analyze the images now." Minutes later, the doctor entered the room with a comforting smile. "I have good news. The baby is perfectly fine. Heartbeats are normal, and there are no signs of placental abruption or any other complication." Eleanor felt tears of relief stream down her face. One hand instinctively rested on her belly, while the other covered her eyes. "As for you," the doctor continued, "you have a small bruise on your back, but nothing serious. I'll prescribe a safe analgesic for pregnant women and recommend rest for a few days. I'd like to keep you under observation tonight, as a precaution." "Thank you, Doctor. Sincerely." Dr. Raphael nodded, his eyes revealing a compassion that went beyond the professional. "I noticed there was tension at the event," he commented, choosing his words carefully. "I don't want to intrude, but as your temporary doctor, I need to ask, do you feel safe returning to the same environment?" The question caught Eleanor by surprise. It was the first time someone had openly questioned her safety, verbalizing concerns she herself had been suppressing. She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger, who nevertheless seemed to be the only person genuinely concerned about her well-being. "I believe the fall was not accidental." Dr. Raphael nodded, showing no surprise. "I suspected as much. There was something about that woman's behavior. Victoria, correct?" When Eleanor confirmed with a nod, he continued, "And your partner seemed more concerned with appearances than with you." Eleanor didn't reply, but her silence was eloquent. "You know," Dr. Raphael continued, sitting in a chair next to the gurney, "I've worked in obstetrics for 15 years, and one thing I've learned is that pregnancy often exacerbates problematic situations in relationships. Truths that were hidden are revealed." "It seems you know my life without ever having met me before," Eleanor commented with a faint, sad smile. "Unfortunately, I see similar patterns frequently." He paused, as if considering his next words. "Mrs. Albright, Eleanor, please." "Eleanor, as a doctor, my concern goes beyond your immediate physical well-being. If you believe you were deliberately pushed, that constitutes assault. And if your partner is not offering adequate support, that concerns me about the environment you will return to." Eleanor felt a knot in her throat. Put so directly and clearly, the circumstances of her life seemed even more alarming. "I have some contacts who can help," Dr. Raphael continued. "A lawyer specializing in cases of violence against women and a journalist friend who has been exposing abuses of power. If you're interested, I can put you in touch with them." Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened and Robert entered, without knocking. His face was composed in a mask of marital concern that didn't reach his eyes. "How is my darling?" he asked, leaning in to kiss Eleanor's forehead in a calculated gesture of public affection. "The baby is fine," Eleanor replied, noticing how he hadn't asked about her. "Excellent." Robert smiled briefly, then turned to the doctor. "Doctor, I appreciate your assistance, but from here on we will take over with our private doctor. If you could, prepare the discharge." "Unfortunately, that won't be possible tonight," Dr. Raphael replied firmly. "The patient needs to remain under observation, and I've already given the necessary instructions to the team." Robert's face hardened momentarily, but he quickly regained his composure. "I understand. In that case, I'll stay here with her." "There's no need," Eleanor interjected, surprising herself with her assertiveness. "You have that early meeting tomorrow with the First Minister. Go home and rest." Robert seemed momentarily disconcerted by the refusal, but quickly took the offered exit. "If you're sure, that meeting really is crucial for the future of the ministry." "I'm sure," Eleanor replied, a new coolness in her voice. After a few formalities and empty promises to return in the morning, Robert finally left. Dr. Raphael observed the interaction with clinical attention, but made no comments. "I'll need some information for your file," he said when they were alone again. "And if I may be so bold, I'd like to leave my personal card, in case you need anything." Eleanor accepted the card, noticing that in addition to the office number, there was a mobile number handwritten on the back, with the inscription, "For emergencies." After completing the necessary procedures, Dr. Raphael left her in the care of the nursing staff. Eleanor was transferred to a private room, a courtesy of the hospital, as the nurse explained, due to special circumstances. Alone in the hospital room, Eleanor finally allowed herself to cry, not for the accident nor for the physical pain, but for the collapse of everything she believed she had built. Her relationship, apparently based on lies, her career, threatened by professional betrayal, and now, the revelation that an enmity that had permeated her adult life had much deeper and more disturbing roots than she had imagined. Physically and emotionally exhausted, Eleanor began to fall asleep when her phone, placed on the bedside table by the nurse, vibrated with the arrival of a message. Imagining it would be Robert with some elaborate excuse, she hesitated before checking. The number was unknown and the message enigmatic. "I have proof of what happened tonight, and more. Recordings of your partner with Victoria Miller that would confirm your worst suspicions. If you're interested, simply reply yes." Eleanor stared at the screen, stunned. Could it be a trap, another manipulation by Victoria? Or would it really be someone willing to help her? Paranoia and exhaustion vied for space in her troubled mind. It was then that a second message arrived. "I know you have no reason to trust strangers, but ask Dr. Campos about Project Veritas. He will confirm that we are trustworthy." Eleanor reread the message several times. What was this Project Veritas? And how did they know about her contact with Dr. Raphael? The doctor seemed genuinely concerned about her well-being, but could it be possible that he was involved in something larger? Her phone vibrated again. This time it was a news app notification. Regional Minister of Culture Robert Mendonça and presenter Victoria Miller, photographed in alleged intimate situation after charity event. With a racing heart, Eleanor opened the news. The photo, taken at the entrance of the Savoy Hotel, showed Robert helping Victoria into a taxi, their hands intertwined, their faces close in a way that exceeded the bounds of professional friendship. The caption mentioned that the photo had been taken minutes after the hospitalization of curator Eleanor Albright, the minister's partner, and currently 6 months pregnant. The speed with which the news had leaked was frightening. Someone had carefully recorded that moment and ensured its almost immediate dissemination. Eleanor's hands trembled as she typed her reply to the mysterious message, "Yes." Morning arrived with the golden light of the London sun filtering through the blinds of the hospital room. Eleanor woke from a restless sleep, marked by fragmented dreams where faces from the past and present mingled in a confused dance of betrayals and revelations. For a fleeting instant, she forgot where she was and what had happened, but reality soon caught up when she tried to change position and felt the pain in her back. Nurse Brenda, a middle-aged woman with a gentle smile and eyes that seemed to have seen everything in years of her profession, entered the room carrying a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Mrs. Albright. How are you feeling today?" "A little sore, but better, thank you." As the nurse checked her vital signs and adjusted the IV, Eleanor checked her phone. There were dozens of notifications, messages from worried friends, emails from colleagues at the Art Foundation, news alerts, and nothing from Robert. His absence was as eloquent as any word could be. "Dr. Campos will be here to see you in about half an hour," Brenda informed, adjusting the pillow so Eleanor could sit more comfortably. He left specific instructions to be informed as soon as you woke up. He seems very dedicated, Eleanor commented, accepting the cup of tea the nurse offered. Dr. Raphael is special, Brenda replied with a knowing smile. He's not like most doctors who pass through here. He truly cares. After Brenda left, Eleanor checked the messages from the unknown number from the previous night again. There was nothing new beyond the enigmatic yes she herself had sent. What was this Project Veritas they mentioned? And how did they know about her connection with Dr. Raphael? While having her breakfast, Eleanor opened the news app. As expected, the incident at the Savoy Hotel had become a minor social scandal, amplified by Robert's public position and the cruel timing. Abandoning his pregnant partner after an accident, only to be caught in a compromising situation with another woman, was the kind of gossip London society adored. "May I come in?" Dr. Raphael's familiar voice sounded from the half-open door. "Of course," Eleanor replied, putting her phone aside. The doctor entered wearing his white lab coat over a light blue shirt. He looked rested and serene, as if he hadn't spent the previous night dealing with an emergency outside his normal hours. "How are you feeling?" he asked, approaching to examine the results of the morning tests that Brenda had left on the clipboard. "Physically, I'm better. Emotionally..." Eleanor left the sentence incomplete with a small gesture of resignation. Dr. Raphael nodded understandingly. "I saw the news. I'm sorry you're going through this publicly, on top of everything else." "Doctor," Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then decided to get straight to the point. "What is Project Veritas?" The doctor's expression subtly changed, not exactly surprise, but a sudden intensity, as if a mask of professional casualness had been momentarily suspended. "Who mentioned that to you?" Eleanor showed him the message on her phone. Dr. Raphael read it carefully, then returned the device and closed the room door, ensuring privacy. "Project Veritas is not something we discuss openly, especially in institutions like hospitals, where walls have ears," he began, sitting in the chair beside the bed. "It's an informal network of professionals, doctors, lawyers, journalists, social workers, who have come together to help victims of abuses of power who would normally go unpunished due to the perpetrator's influence." Eleanor listened attentively, a mix of relief and apprehension growing within her. "It started about 5 years ago, after a particularly horrific case involving the wife of a politician who was systematically isolated, manipulated, and then discarded when she tried to report abuse. The system failed her at every level, and he paused, as if carefully choosing his words, she didn't withstand the pressure. "I understand," Eleanor said softly. "Since then, we've identified similar patterns and intervened when possible. We are not vigilantes. We work within the law, but using our resources and connections to balance the scales that normally favor those with power and influence. And how did they know about my situation so quickly?" "That I don't know," Dr. Raphael replied honestly. "We have many members and collaborators. Someone must have recognized the signs at the event and alerted the network. Messages usually come from our media coordinator, an investigative journalist who prefers to remain anonymous for obvious reasons." Eleanor processed the information. Part of her wanted to reject it all. It seemed too conspiratorial, almost like a movie plot. But another part, perhaps the most intuitive, recognized the truth. In the doctor's words, "What happened to you at yesterday's event wasn't a coincidence, was it?" Dr. Raphael asked softly. Eleanor hesitated only for a moment before deciding to trust him. "No, Victoria deliberately pushed me, and I believe Robert knew it would happen." The confirmation did not seem to surprise the doctor. "I suspected as much from the moment I saw them interacting. There was something rehearsed in the way they reacted." He paused. "Eleanor, would you be willing to file a formal complaint? Against Victoria and Robert?" The idea seemed simultaneously terrifying and liberating. "Yes, we have an exceptional lawyer in the project, Dr. Louisa Maxwell. She specializes in cases of violence against women, especially those involving public figures, and most importantly, she is not intimidated by power or money." While Eleanor considered the suggestion, her phone vibrated again. It was the unknown number. Photos and audio available confirming conspiracy. Robert and Victoria planned the accident in advance. I will send the evidence as soon as a secure channel is confirmed. Dr. Raphael read the message and nodded. That would be our media contact, Ben Carter. He has methods for obtaining information that most journalists wouldn't be able to get. All legal, I assure you, but extremely effective. How can I be sure I can trust him? Or you, to be honest? Eleanor questioned, natural distrust surfacing after so many recent betrayals. A fair question. Dr. Raphael smiled slightly. I don't ask you to trust blindly, but I can introduce you to Dr. Louisa today if you wish. She can better explain how the project works and what your rights and options would be, without obligation. Before Eleanor could respond, there was a commotion in the corridor. Raised voices, including Brenda's protesting, and then the room door burst open. Robert entered, impeccably dressed in a dark grey suit, followed by a woman Eleanor recognized as Dr. Clara Vance, the private gynecologist Robert had insisted she consult since the beginning of her pregnancy. "Eleanor, darling, I came as soon as I could," Robert exclaimed theatrically, leaning in to kiss her forehead. His breath had a faint trace of mint that couldn't completely disguise the smell of alcohol. "I brought Clara to ensure you receive the best care." Dr. Raphael stood up, his posture assuming a professional formality. "Good morning. I'm Dr. Rafael Campos, responsible for Mrs. Albright's case. Since admission, I appreciate your emergency services, doctor, but I will be taking over her care from now on." Dr. Clara replied coldly, without extending her hand. "I am the obstetrician who has been following her entire pregnancy." A tense silence permeated the room. Eleanor observed the dynamic with new clarity. There was something in the way Robert and Clara interacted, a subtle familiarity, almost imperceptible, but which her newly opened eyes could detect. "I believe the decision rests with the patient," Dr. Raphael replied calmly, turning to Eleanor. "Mrs. Albright?" All eyes converged on her. It was a decisive moment, Eleanor realized, the kind of moment when seemingly small choices determine the course of entire lives. She felt the baby move, as if offering a silent reminder that her decisions would now affect 2 lives. "I prefer to continue with Dr. Raphael," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. Robert's expression hardened momentarily before his social mask recomposed. "Eleanor, darling, I understand you're grateful to the doctor for his emergency assistance, but Clara knows your entire medical history. It would be more prudent—" "My decision is made, Robert," Eleanor interrupted, surprising everyone, including herself. "I see you're emotionally shaken by the incident." Robert tried again, his tone now condescending. "Perhaps we should discuss this when you're more rational." "Mr. Mendonza," Dr. Raphael interjected, "I suggest respecting the patient's autonomy. Mrs. Albright is perfectly lucid and capable of making her own medical decisions. And who are you to meddle in family matters?" Robert turned to the doctor, his facade beginning to crack. "Someone concerned with the well-being of the patient and her baby," the doctor replied calmly. "Something that, forgive me for saying, doesn't seem to be your priority, considering last night's circumstances." Robert's face paled slightly. His eyes quickly moved to Eleanor's phone, visible on the bedside table, as if calculating whether she might have already seen the news. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I think you do," Eleanor replied. "Just as you know exactly how and why I fell yesterday." Dr. Clara cleared her throat uncomfortably, clearly realizing she had walked into a more complicated situation than she expected. "Perhaps we should give the couple privacy to discuss personal matters." "There's nothing to discuss," Eleanor said. "Robert, I would like you to leave now. We will talk when I am discharged." The shock on his face would be almost comical in other circumstances. In 5 years together, Eleanor had rarely confronted him directly, preferring diplomatic compromises and rational conversations. The woman who now dismissed him with quiet authority was someone he clearly didn't recognize. "Eleanor, you're not thinking clearly. This doctor is obviously influencing you against me." He tried one last strategy, his voice alternating between authority and victimization. "After everything we've built together, are you going to let a stranger interfere like this?" The only stranger here is you, Eleanor replied, surprising herself with the sudden clarity. The man I've known for 5 years doesn't really exist, does he? It was just a role you were playing. Robert opened his mouth to protest, but was interrupted by the ring of his own phone. Checking the screen, his face visibly paled. Without another word, he hurriedly left the room, followed by a confused Dr. Clara. The silence that followed was interrupted by a light knock on the door. Brenda entered, carrying a small package. "This arrived for you. The messenger insisted it was urgent." Eleanor opened the package with trembling fingers. Inside was a USB stick and a handwritten note. "Watch together, then decide the next steps." Dr. Raphael looked at the object with a mixture of apprehension and determination. "Do you have a laptop we can use?" "I can lend you mine," Brenda offered, to both their surprise. Seeing their questioning looks, she smiled. "I've worked here for 30 years, doctors and nurses. I've seen a lot of bad things happen to good women because no one wanted to get involved. I'm not part of your secret project, Doctor, but I know when someone needs help." Minutes later, the three were gathered around the nurse's modest laptop. The USB stick contained various audio and video files, meticulously organized and dated. Eleanor clicked on the most recent one, dated 2 days before the event at the Savoy Hotel. The recording showed Robert and Victoria in a luxurious apartment Eleanor had never seen, presumably the one in Knightsbridge he kept secret. They were sitting on a white sofa, wine glasses in hand, in an intimacy that confirmed Eleanor's worst suspicions. "All set for tomorrow?" Robert's voice asked. "Are you sure you can make it look like an accident?" "Please." Victoria rolled her eyes disdainfully. "It's just about positioning the chair at the right moment. With that belly, she has no stability. The best part is everyone will see, but no one will be able to prove anything." "What if she gets seriously hurt?" "That's what worried me," Victoria replied, leaning in to kiss his neck. "That you still cared about her." "Don't be ridiculous." Robert pushed her hair away to return the kiss. "It's just a practical matter. A serious accident would generate investigations, questions. We need something humiliating but not dangerous. You're underestimating my talent for calculated destructions." Victoria smiled. That smile Eleanor knew all too well. "When we're done with Eleanor Albright, she'll never raise her head in the art circuit again. The New Horizons project will be mine. Her career will be mine. And you—" She ran her nails down his chest. "You've been mine for much longer than she imagines." Eleanor watched the scene with a strange detachment, as if observing characters in a film, and not people who had been central to her life until hours ago. The initial shock of betrayal had already been processed. Now only the cold clarity of confirmation remained. The following files were equally revealing. Conversations between Robert and sponsors, in which he systematically undermined Eleanor's credibility. Meetings with Victoria and other allies to reallocate funds from the project she had developed. Even a conversation with Dr. Clara, which suggested a relationship far beyond professional between the doctor and Robert. The last file, however, was the most impactful. It was a recording apparently made during the event itself, moments after Eleanor's fall. It showed a side corridor of the Savoy Hotel, where Victoria met with an elderly man Eleanor immediately recognized, Lord Augustus Thorne, one of the most influential sponsors of the Regional Ministry of Culture and Robert's political mentor. "It's done," Victoria said, an almost feverish excitement in her eyes. She fell, literally, in front of everyone. The Lord did not seem to share her enthusiasm. His face revealed a mixture of discomfort and regret. "This went too far, Victoria. One thing is cultural policy, redistribution of funds. Another is physically assaulting a pregnant woman. Don't be melodramatic, Augustus. It was just a little push, and you agreed to the plan." "I agreed to help Robert take full control of the project without her interference. I never agreed to this." "Details, my dear lord, details." Victoria dismissed the concerns with a casual gesture. "The important thing is that now we have a clear path. Tomorrow we will announce the restructuring of the New Horizons curatorship, with you as honorary chairman, me as executive director, and Robert ensuring the flow of federal funds. The video ended with the Lord walking away, visibly perturbed, while Victoria smiled triumphantly. Eleanor closed the laptop, a strange sense of calm enveloping her. She expected to feel devastated, betrayed, furious. And part of her certainly felt all of that, but a nearly crystalline clarity about what she needed to do predominated. "Can Dr. Louisa still see me today?" she asked Dr. Raphael. "I'm sure she can," he replied, already reaching for his phone. "And what about the journalist, Ben, right? Does he have access to these same files?" "He probably compiled them. Ben has sources everywhere." Eleanor nodded, her mind now working with surprising objectivity. "They're not just stealing my professional project or betraying my personal trust," she explained, unconsciously caressing her belly. "They're using public funds, manipulating a social program that would affect underserved communities, corrupting the very purpose of art as a tool for transformation." Dr. Raphael observed, her with a new respect, recognizing the strength emerging through the layers of shock and pain. "What do you wish to do?" "Fight," Eleanor replied simply. "Not just for myself or for my baby, but for everything I've always believed in. And for that, I'll need allies." Brenda, who had remained silent throughout the video exhibition, then spoke. "I know many nurses and technicians who have attended to Victoria Miller over the years. She's not kind to those she considers inferior. Many would have stories to tell if they knew someone would listen without judgment." Eleanor looked at the nurse, with gratitude, recognizing the invaluable worth of unexpected allies. At that moment, she felt her baby stir energetically, as if offering its own approval of the nascent plan. "Then let's begin," she said, her voice now firm as the ground after a storm, tested, shaken, but intact and ready to sustain new life. 3 days after being discharged from the hospital, Eleanor watched the sunrise from the balcony of a small apartment in Greenwich, lent by a cousin of Brenda's. The address was unknown to Robert and his allies, offering the temporary refuge she needed to reorganize her life and prepare her next steps. The first golden rays illuminated the hills of the wonderful city, while the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. Eleanor caressed her belly, feeling the now familiar movements of her baby, a girl, as she had discovered in the last ultrasound performed by Dr. Raphael. "We'll be strong together, Marina," she whispered, using for the first time the name she had chosen the previous night. Marina, like the sea, deep, resilient, and capable of constantly transforming without losing its essence. The ringing of her phone interrupted the contemplative moment. It was Louisa Maxwell, the lawyer from Project Veritas, who had taken on her case with impressive efficiency. "Good morning, Eleanor. I hope I haven't woken you." "Not at all. I've been awake for some time." "Great. I have news. The formal statement you gave yesterday, combined with the audiovisual evidence, was sufficient for the Crown Prosecution Service to open an official investigation against Victoria for physical assault and against Robert for complicity." Eleanor took a deep breath, absorbing the information. Since the discovery of the recordings, events had unfolded with dizzying speed. In less than 72 hours, she had given a formal statement, filed for a protective order against Robert and Victoria, and initiated the process to secure her professional project. "There's more," Louisa continued. "Lord Augustus Thorne contacted us this morning." "What does he want?" Eleanor asked, surprised. "It seems his video with Victoria left him quite shaken. He's willing to testify about the fund diversion scheme for the New Horizons project. According to him, he never imagined the situation would escalate to physical assault on a pregnant woman, and he is regretful." Eleanor remained silent for a few moments. The Lord had been a friend of her father, one of the first to support her when she entered the art circuit. His participation in the conspiracy had been one of the most painful betrayals. "Do you believe in this sudden regret?" she finally asked. "I believe in self-preservation," Louisa replied directly. "He realized the ship is sinking and wants to jump before he goes down with it, but that doesn't diminish the value of his testimony." "I understand. There's something else. Ben Carter will publish a special report on the case today. He sent me a draft for approval. It's well-founded, respectful of your privacy, but ruthless with Robert and Victoria. I believe it will make a significant impact. Eleanor remembered the journalist she had met the day before, a man in his early 40s with keen eyes and an almost obsessive determination for hidden truths. He had explained that he had begun investigating Robert months earlier, after receiving anonymous tips about fund embezzlement at the Regional Ministry of Culture. Victoria was just a piece of the puzzle, Ben had explained. But when I realized her personal connection to you and later discovered the plan for the event, the story gained a human dimension I couldn't ignore. Send it to me too, Eleanor asked Louisa. I'd like to read it before publication. Of course, I'll be at the apartment at 11 a.m. to discuss the next legal steps. Dr. Raphael mentioned he'll stop by earlier, around 9 a.m. for your checkup. Thank you, Louisa, for everything. After ending the call, Eleanor prepared herself a cup of lemon balm tea. Her phone vibrated again, this time with an urgent news notification. Regional Minister of Culture Robert Mendonça removed from office after embezzlement allegations. Presenter Victoria Miller's program suspended by state broadcaster. Attached to the news was a photo of Robert leaving the Regional Ministry of Culture, face partially covered, escorted by visibly embarrassed aides. The empire he had built was beginning to crumble, and with surprising speed. Punctually at 9 a.m., Dr. Raphael arrived for the promised checkup. In the few days since the incident, he had become more than a doctor to Eleanor. He was a friend, a confidant, a constant presence amidst the chaos. "How is my favorite patient today?" he asked with a gentle smile, placing his medical bag on the living room table. "Physically well, emotionally processing a lot." "Understandable." He nodded, preparing the sphygmomanometer to check her blood pressure. "I saw the news about Robert. It's impressive how seemingly solid structures can crumble so quickly when the truth comes to light." As he performed the routine examination, Eleanor observed his precise movements, his focused attention, the genuine care in every gesture. There was something comforting in his presence, a solidity that contrasted dramatically with the shifting sands that had characterized her relationship with Robert. "Everything looks great," Dr. Raphael concluded, putting away his instruments. "The baby is in perfect position, your vital signs are excellent, and the bruise on your back is almost completely healed." "Thank you, Raphael," Eleanor said, deliberately using only his first name, "not just for the medical care, but for everything else." Their eyes met for a moment, and something silent but eloquent passed between them, a mutual recognition that, amidst the storm of the past few days, an unexpected connection had formed. "I'm just doing my job," he replied modestly, though his smile said more. "Your job as a doctor, or as a member of Project Veritas?" Eleanor asked, with a slight tone of provocation in her voice. "Both, I suppose," he smiled. "Though I must confess that your situation mobilized something beyond professional duty." Before Eleanor could reply, her phone rang again. It was Ben Carter. "Eleanor, good morning. Sorry to call so early, but I thought you should know immediately. I just received an anonymous call with information about Victoria Miller that completely changes the landscape." "What kind of information?" Eleanor asked, putting the phone on speaker so Raphael could also hear. "Apparently, she has a history of similar behavior. 3 other women have reported experiences of professional and personal sabotage at her hands over the past 10 years. One of them also suffered an accidental fall during an event." Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. Are these women willing to speak? 2 of them are, especially now that they see a real chance for justice. And there's more. I've received documents proving that Victoria has been systematically falsifying audience reports for her state TV program, inflating numbers to justify her inflated salary and her influence at the broadcaster. "That would explain how she gained so much power so quickly," Raphael commented. "Exactly," Ben agreed. "I'm adding this information to the special report. It will be released at noon today, in the online edition, and tomorrow in print." After hanging up, Eleanor turned to Raphael, a new determination in her gaze. "It seems the circle of lies is closing quickly." "And how do you feel about this?" he asked, genuinely interested in her emotional response, not just her physical condition. Eleanor reflected for a moment before answering. "I feel relief. Not joy at their downfall, but relief at seeing the truth emerge. And a certain sadness, too, not for what I lost, but for what never truly existed. Raphael nodded understandingly. It's a grieving process in a way. You're mourning not just a relationship, but a version of reality you believe to be true. Exactly. Eleanor smiled, grateful to be understood without the need for elaborate explanations. But I also feel something growing in place of what was lost. A kind of clarity, as if I were seeing colors I didn't know existed. The rest of the morning passed at a tranquil pace. Eleanor reviewed the report sent by Ben, made some editing suggestions, and approved the final text. Louisa arrived punctually at 11 a.m., bringing documents for the formalization of legal measures and additional news about the case. The Regional Ministry of Culture issued an official statement guaranteeing the continuity of the New Horizons project under its original direction, Louisa informed, handing a copy of the document to Eleanor. Apparently, several sponsors threatened to withdraw support if you were removed. Your professional reputation remains unblemished, perhaps even strengthened by all of this. This is surprising, Eleanor commented, genuinely astonished by the unexpected support. Not so much, Louisa smiled. You built solid relationships over the years based on competence and integrity. When the crisis came, those people remembered who you truly are. At 12:15 p.m., Eleanor's phone began to vibrate incessantly with notifications. Ben's report had been published and was generating immediate and intense repercussions. The title, direct and impactful, summarized the scandal: Conspiracy, Betrayal, and Power, the inside story of Eleanor Albright's fall. The article was meticulously documented, presenting concrete evidence for each accusation. It included testimonies from Victoria's other victims, analysis of documents proving the falsification of reports, and, most impressively, an official statement from Lord Augustus Thorne, admitting his involvement and expressing regret. Eleanor, the Lord had written, I ask for forgiveness not only for what happened recently, but for having failed the trust your father, my friend, placed in me. I allowed ambition and convenience to overshadow values we once shared. I am at the disposal of justice and truth, however painful it may be for me. As she read these words, Eleanor felt an unexpected emotion emerge. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a certain peace. The cycle of betrayals and lies was being broken, not by vengeance, but by a necessary return to truth. The afternoon brought further developments. A call from her assistant at the Art Foundation informed her that ministry officials had made contact, requesting her presence as soon as she felt able to resume full control of the project. Several international galleries and curators expressed support through emails and messages. Even the Mayor of London had called personally to express solidarity. At the end of the day, sitting again on the balcony of the small apartment in Greenwich, Eleanor contemplated the London sunset. The last 72 hours had completely transformed her reality, personal, professional, emotional. The empire of lies built by Robert and Victoria had crumbled with surprising speed when exposed to the light of truth. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Raphael, returning as he had promised after his shift at the hospital. I brought something for us to celebrate. He smiled, raising a bottle. Organic grape juice, the best I could find. I hope you like white grapes. Eleanor laughed, a genuine light laugh, the first in many days. Perfect. I have some cheeses in the fridge that will pair wonderfully. As they set up a small table on the balcony, talking about the day's events, Eleanor realized something fundamental. Amidst the chaos of the past few weeks, she had rediscovered her own voice. Not the public voice of the respected curator, nor the private voice of the conciliatory partner, but her essential voice, the one that spoke her truth without fear or hesitation. A toast, Raphael proposed, raising his juice glass, to new beginnings. To truths revealed, Eleanor added, clinking her glass against his. The sun disappeared on the horizon, painting the sky in dramatic shades of orange and purple. It was a unique spectacle, as only London could offer. Grand in its beauty, imperfect in its contours, honest in its transience. You know, Eleanor commented, observing the sky, for years I lived in fear of losing what I had built, the relationship, the career, the stability. This fear made me ignore signs, accept less than I deserved, compromise values I had always defended. It's ironic that, by losing all of that, I found something much more valuable. And what would that be? Raphael asked, his attentive eyes reflecting the colors of twilight. Freedom. The freedom that comes from being anchored in truth, even when it is painful. At that moment, her phone vibrated with a new notification. It was a message from Ben. I just learned that Victoria Miller left the country this afternoon, apparently heading to Argentina. Robert is being formally investigated for embezzlement and malfeasance. Their empire is officially in ruins. Eleanor read the message aloud to Raphael, then put her phone aside, without replying immediately. There was no joy in others' misfortune, only the recognition that actions have consequences, and that truth, though sometimes slow, eventually finds its way. What will you do now? Raphael asked after a few moments of contemplative silence. Professionally, I mean. Will you resume the project immediately? Yes, but with some modifications, Eleanor replied, her eyes shining with renewed purpose. This episode made me realize that the New Horizons project needs to go beyond contemporary art. I want to include an educational component focused on ethics and transparency in cultural institutions. Art is not just about beauty or expression, it's also about truth. Raphael smiled, clearly impressed by her ability to transform a traumatic experience into something constructive. And personally, he asked carefully, respecting the still delicate boundaries of this new territory between them. Eleanor looked at her belly, then at the horizon, and finally at the man beside her, a man who had entered her life by chance, or perhaps not, and who represented values she had always longed for: honesty, compassion, moral courage. Personally, I'm learning to live one day at a time, to trust again, not blindly, but with my eyes wide open, to build something new on more solid foundations. They remained silent for a few moments, letting unspoken words float between them, promises yet unmade, possibilities yet unexplored, a future yet unwritten, but suddenly filled with potential. Eleanor's phone vibrated again. It was a message from Brenda. Dear, I just heard on TV, victory for truth. When you come back to the hospital, we'll have a celebration. In the ward, everyone's rooting for you. And tell Dr. Raphael he's not as discreet as he thinks. We all noticed how he looks at you. Eleanor laughed and showed the message to Raphael, who blushed slightly before joining her laughter. The next morning, Eleanor officially returned to work. Not to the office at the Regional Ministry of Culture, which was still embroiled in investigations and restructurings, but to the headquarters of the London Arts Foundation, where she had always had an office. She was greeted with spontaneous applause from the staff, a demonstration of solidarity that deeply moved her. On her desk, she found a sealed envelope with her name on it. Inside was a handwritten letter from Lord Augustus Thorne. Eleanor, words cannot repair the damage caused, nor justify my actions. I do not ask for forgiveness. I know it must be earned with actions, not words. I merely want you to know that I have formally resigned from all my positions on cultural and artistic committees, and have requested that the funds that would have been allocated to the project under Robert and Victoria's control be entirely redirected to the original New Horizons, under your exclusive direction. Your father would be proud of the woman you have become and the strength you have shown in the face of adversity. I failed him, and I failed you, but perhaps there is still time to do what is right. With respect and sincere regret, Augustus Thorne. Eleanor carefully folded the letter and put it in her bag. Time would tell if the Lord's regret was genuine, if the redemption he sought was possible. For now, she would accept the resources for her project and the opportunity to carry out the work she had always dreamed of. Over the following weeks, life gradually found a new rhythm. The scandal involving Robert and Victoria became headlines for a few days, then was replaced by other news. Eleanor gave a single interview to Ben Carter, not to fuel personal drama, but to highlight the importance of integrity in cultural institutions and the social impact of the New Horizons project. Robert attempted contact a few times, first with text messages begging for a chance to explain, then with long, self-pitying emails, and finally through lawyers trying to negotiate financial settlements in exchange for her silence about other ministry schemes. Eleanor ignored the first attempts and forwarded the latter to Louisa Maxwell, who handled them with her characteristic professional competence. As for Victoria, she completely disappeared from the public radar. Rumors suggested she was in Argentina, others in Europe. Eleanor preferred not to know the Victoria chapter in her life was definitively closed. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, 3 months after the incident at the Savoy Hotel, Eleanor walked along the banks of the Thames in London with Raphael. Their relationship had evolved naturally, without haste, built on foundations of mutual respect and genuine admiration. He now accompanied her to all prenatal appointments, no longer as his doctor, a position he had ethically transferred to a trusted colleague, but as her partner. "You know what impresses me most about you?" Raphael commented, as they walked hand in hand on the damp sand. "Your ability to transform pain into purpose." Eleanor smiled, considering his words. "I believe every experience, even the most painful, contains seeds of growth. The trick is not to let yourself be defined by the trauma, but by what you choose to do from it." At that moment, as if in agreement, little Marina gave a particularly energetic kick. Eleanor brought Raphael's hand to her belly, now in its 7th month, allowing him to feel the movements of the daughter who, though not biologically his, he already loved as his own. "She's going to be strong like her mother," he commented, marveling at the life pulsating beneath his fingers. "And compassionate like you," Eleanor completed, intertwining her fingers with his. The sun began to set, painting the London sky with its characteristic colours. In the distance, St. Paul's Cathedral watched over the city with open arms, as it had for nearly a century, a silent witness to countless stories of falls and redemptions, endings and new beginnings, transformations and rebirths. Eleanor Albright, the woman who had fallen literally and metaphorically before a society that preferred to look away, now stood tall, stronger, and more determined than ever. Her journey of emotional survival, reclaimed dignity and justice won, was far from over, but each step was now taken on firm ground, anchored in truth and illuminated by the promise of an authentic future. And as the sun disappeared on the horizon, a crystalline certainty filled her heart. Sometimes it takes a fall to discover the true height to which one can ascend.